which is fundamentally different and will remain different than it was in 2021.
Friedberg, you were talking in the chat about Adani Enterprises and Hindenburg doing this short research and publishing it. Stock has just absolutely gotten clobbered. They were trading at, 4,100 was the 52-week high, and this thing has just cratered in the last 5 days.
I mean, I think
explain what's going on here.
Well, I mean, the conversation I thought it would be interesting for us to have is the role that these short seller research analysts play in driving efficient markets by identifying perhaps things that the market broadly is missing, particularly given that a few weeks ago we were all kind of talking about the FTX debacle and how no one was doing their diligence and no one was digging in and no one was kind of revealing publicly what was going on inside of that business that ultimately caused significant losses. You know, the claims made by Hindenburg is that this company, Adani, which is founded and run by a guy named Gautam Adani, he started the company like, I think 35 years ago. And he's built this thing into this, you know, the sprawling empire, as people would say, where he owns ports, he owns mining companies, he owns energy transmission businesses, he's got a whole green energy business, and he's taken a bunch of these companies and he's floated them publicly. So they're all kind of publicly traded. There's some degree of interrelatedness between all these businesses. It reminds me a lot of, I don't know if any of you guys remember Ike Batista out of Brazil. You guys remember this guy? Where, you know, he kind of built this sprawling empire, very kind of broadly diversified industrial conglomerate with, you know, lots of different kind of segments, and used a lot of leverage, a lot of debt to grow the business, and a lot of interrelated inter-party transactions. And ultimately, the whole thing kind of came crashing down. And that this Adani business, it's super technical and super complicated, all the kind of accounting shenanigans that Hindenburg is claiming has been going on, and capital markets shenanigans that they're claiming have been going on with this business. But their kind of report, which I think is like 400 pages long, has caused...
The response was 400 pages.
The response was long too. Yeah, and then the markets shrugged off the response that he put out, didn't really care, and they kept selling the stocks off. So there's like 7 or 8 publicly traded companies, all of which are just getting decimated. Look, I don't have any strong opinion on this business. I kind of skimmed through the thing. But it really made me question like how such a big, call it accounting or capital markets fraud, if it really is that, can go on, and how much of a role these sorts of players play in the market, and whether you guys think that this is a good thing in the market to have these short seller reporters out there, you know, doing this analysis, publishing it. Jason, by the way, you called out Nikola, the electric car company. As you know, Hindenburg put out that Nikola report, stock tanked. Right, they claimed it was all fraud, et cetera, and then the thing got destroyed.
And it was. Trevor Milton got convicted, yeah.
Right, and so, I mean, I guess, do you guys think that these guys have a positive role, net in the market, in kind of identifying and calling out this stuff? Because we all have friends that are on the wrong side of short sellers, and they complain about it, and it can be really difficult to grow and build a business when people...
Elon had these guys literally claiming he was running a fraud for years and years, and it was an intense amount of scrutiny, because when the stock was less trafficked in, when we were in it in 2015 and 16 and 17, that was the constant refrain. And Elon was constantly batting back folks like this who would make claims. And the way that these guys are allowed to operate is because they use the First Amendment and say, we have the right to say this stuff. I think that shorting falls into 2 buckets. One is you use it as a hedging instrument. So when we talk about spread trades like long Google, short Facebook, or long Facebook, short Google, you should be allowed to short. I think that's a very reasonable thing to do. I think the question is, if you were on the inside of a company and you say XYZ is happening, for example, Trevor Milton, and it causes the stock to go up and it turns out to be fraudulent, he's held accountable. The question is, should there be the same responsibility for people on the outside who, if they have enough distribution, can say the exact opposite of XYZ is happening? In this case, XYZ is not happening, which then causes the stock to go down. Because what the business model of these short sellers is, write a document, it looks very polished and very credible, put on some positions, then put the document out. If the stock goes down, you close it out. In my opinion, I think that short sellers are a really important part of a well-functioning market, or the ability to short. But what I would like to do is take an extra step, which is you should hold these folks accountable the same way you'd hold an insider accountable, which is almost to the effect of like, when you put out this screed, if you make money from it, it should sit in escrow, and the SEC should actually adjudicate whether it's true or not. So in the case of Hindenburg and Nikola, they shorted the stock, they put out a report, it turned out they were right. All that money is completely well earned. Now, what if this Adani thing turns out to be not true? Or true? Nobody knows right now, except 50% of the market cap has already been wiped out. So that's where things, I think, are in a bit of a gray area. The last thing I'll say is that if you look at the developing world, there's a very gray line between some of the leading entrepreneurs and these governments, because these entrepreneurs are doing the work of some of these governments, whether it's Ike Batista in Brazil in one moment, right around natural resources, or Adani and Ambani in India, or a lot of the people that have made a lot of money in China, or the people that are making money in developing markets, Turkey, Russia, etc. The government uses very talented entrepreneurs to go and concentrate capital to develop infrastructure progress. We did that in America in the 1800s as well. So that's where I think, you have to also balance it, because his response was basically like, this is an attack on India. And in a way, you can see where he's coming from, right? Because he's building ports and roads and bridges. And he's like, without this stuff, how is India supposed to even exist in the 21st century? That's a reasonable claim. So I agree with you, Friedberg. I don't know whether the report is right or not. But this extra step of actually having the SEC actually tell us what the answer is, I think would be a very important improvement to how this kind of stuff works.
The other improvement that the SEC has been proposing in Rule 13F-2 is that people would need to disclose their short positions.
Right.
This proposed rule would require institutional investment managers, I'm reading from the SEC website, managers exercising investment discretion over short positions, meeting specified thresholds to report on the proposed Form SHO information related to end-of-month short positions and certain daily activity affecting the short positions.
That is a no-brainer. That should absolutely pass. Right?
The commission would aggregate the resulting data by security, thereby maintaining confidentiality of the reporting managers and publicly disseminating the data to all investors. This new data would supplement the short sale data.
I think this relates to over-lending of stock, right? I mean, this is less about like who's doing what, and it's much more about, are we kind of creating critical fail points in the system by seeing over leverage and over lending in certain
Well, there should also be some rules about the spreading of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That FUD that happened with Tesla Q, I mean, paradoxically, thousands of
that's
anonymous accounts,
that's an example of people essentially lying in public to try to get the stock to move. And Tesla's not a fraud. That's a real company.
I mean, they were winning car of the year while this was going on.
But there was a real human cost to that company, right? To employees that got spooked, to partners that may have gotten spooked. Yeah. The pressure, we saw this, the pressure on Elon in those periods of time. And he was like on the knife's edge, where there was the potential where the company may not have been able to finance its cash flow needs because of those Tesla Q guys. And so it's not to say that the Tesla Q guys can't say it, but they should be forced at some level to prove it if you can create crazy stuff. I posted a link, by the way, for anybody that's interested in reading this. There's a person called Carson Block who's being investigated.
Yes.
Because he may have pushed the boundaries of how short sellers do this. It's a really fascinating read in The Atlantic for anybody who wants to read it. But this is sort of where the short selling thing can a little bit go awry. And it's the title of this is The Man Who Moves Markets. And it's quite a really interesting read if you're interested in how all of this stuff works.
All right, everybody. That's the All In Podcast for February 3rd and 4th. For Sacks, Friedberg, and Chamath, I'm Jake Howell, the world's greatest moderator. We'll see you next week.
Love you, boys. Bye-bye.
We'll let your winners ride.
Rain Man David Sacks.
And instead, we open source it to the fans, and they've just gone crazy with it.
Love you, besties. Queen of Quinoa. Besties are back.
That is my dog taking a notice in your driveway, Sacks. Oh, man.
My haberdasher will meet me at Clinton. We should all just get a room and just have one big, huge orgy, because they're all just useless. It's like this sexual tension that they just need to release somehow. Wet your beak. Wet your beak.
Wet your beak.
We need to get merch. Besties are back.
I'm going all in.